4 anti-narcotics agents plunge into a Mexican ravine, igniting a massive international crisis between the United States and Mexico.
It is, it's just a wild story.
It really is. I mean, just imagine you're steering the lead car in a 5-vehicle convoy.
Right.
And you're navigating through these really treacherous, totally cartel-controlled mountains in Chihuahua. It's 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, April 19th, 2026.
And you got to be just completely exhausted.
Oh, absolutely, because over the last 48 hours, you and this heavily armed joint task force just completely dismantled 6 massive Sinaloa Cartel synthetic drug labs.
Which is like, no small feat.
Not at all. You seized thousands of liters of chemicals. You burned out these massive industrial ovens. I mean, you really hit them where it hurts.
Yeah.
And you happen to be a U.S. Embassy employee.
Yeah.
But officially, your title is just a training instructor.
Right, training.
Yeah, training. But then your tires lose traction. The vehicle skids right off the narrow mountain highway, plunges into the dark ravine below, and just explodes.
It's terrible.
It's horrific. Inside that vehicle are 2 Mexican state investigators and 2 American officials. And instead of this being like a quiet, off-the-books tragedy,
It becomes a massive issue.
exactly, the resulting blast sends a shockwave all the way to Mexico City and Washington, D.C., sparking a total diplomatic firestorm. So welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today for you listening is to unpack this huge stack of sources we've got. Breaking news reports, policy papers from the Strauss Center, and official State Department advisories.
Because there is a lot to get through.
There is. We are looking at how a tragic car crash essentially exposes this super fragile, really high-stakes shadow war of border security.
Okay, let's unpack this because, a car going off a cliff is a terrible accident.
Yeah.
But the political explosion that followed tells us there is a much bigger story hiding beneath the surface here.
Oh, there absolutely is. And to really grasp the sheer scale of the political fallout, we need to first look at the mechanics of the operation itself.
Right. How did they get on that mountain? Exactly. We have to understand the literal groundwork that put these specific officials in that specific place in the middle of the night. Because this was not like some random patrol.
Or a traffic stop gone wrong.
No, not at all. The sources indicate this was the culmination of a highly complex 3-month joint investigation. It was led by the Chihuahua State Investigation Agency.
That's the AEI, right?
Yes, the AEI. They were working alongside Mexico's military.
Okay, and we know you guys listening follow this space, so you already understand that cartels operate industrialized networks, right? We aren't talking about a couple of guys mixing chemicals in a basement.
Definitely not.
But even knowing that, the sheer scale of this specific Sinaloa cartel site is staggering. The state attorney general, Cesar Augusto Moreno, he actually went on record calling it one of the largest chemical drug production sites ever discovered in Mexico.
Which is saying something. And, the logistics required to run a site like this are just immense. That is a really crucial detail here.
What kind of logistics?
Well, the task force found thousands of liters of chemical precursors, massive industrial ovens, giant gas cylinders.
Yeah.
But the detail that really signals how permanent this operation was,
Yeah.
they found a fully functional worker camp right there on the premises.
Oh, wow. So people were living there.
Exactly.
Right, which fundamentally changes the whole picture. I mean,
Yeah.
if you build a permanent housing facility for your lab workers deep in the mountains, you aren't really hiding anymore.
You're putting down roots.
Yeah, you are operating a factory with the total assumption that nobody is coming to shut you down. It implies an entrenched supply chain, regular food deliveries, and, serious security.
It implies total territorial control, really. Taking down a facility of that magnitude requires a massive military-level logistical effort.
You can't just send a couple of cops.
No, you have to secure the perimeter,
Yes.
neutralize any armed resistance, safely dismantle highly volatile chemical vats, and then transport the evidence. It took them 2 full days, April 17 and 18, just to clear the area between the municipalities of Morelos and Huachochi.
2 full days of high adrenaline work. They had to be exhausted.
Beyond exhausted. And it was on the exfiltration, the drive back at 2 in the morning, that the lead vehicle lost control and went over the edge.
Which brings us to the casualties. And this is where the official narrative starts showing these massive cracks.
Huge cracks.
The crash killed the regional director of the AEI, Pedro Ramon Oseguera Cervantes, and his bodyguard. It also killed 2 unnamed U.S. Embassy personnel. Now, the official press releases are clinging to a very specific phrase. They keep calling these Americans instructor officers.
Yeah. claiming they were only present to carry out training tasks. That is the narrative the embassy pushed out immediately.
I cannot buy that.
That's a tough sell.
Let's look at the actual mechanism of a tactical retreat. If you are just an instructor, right, a civilian offering technical advice, you are placed in the middle of the convoy. You are protected.
Standard protocol.
Exactly. You do not sit in the lead vehicle of an armed convoy navigating cartel territory at 2 in the morning, immediately after kicking the hornet's nest. Calling them instructors feels like calling someone a driving coach when they are actually steering the getaway car.
That is a great way to put it. The contradiction is just glaring. And, it's exactly what caused the situation to escalate from a local tragedy to a full-blown international incident.
Because the facade fell apart.
Right. The line between providing training and participating in active combat operations didn't just blur, it completely vanished.
Yeah.
And when those bodies were recovered, a mandatory chain of events was triggered that blew the lid off the entire shadow operation.
So walk us through that causality. How does a literal crash in the mountains turn into the president of Mexico stepping up to a microphone in an absolute rage?
It all comes down to diplomatic protocol. Local police cannot just quietly bury American officials. When an embassy employee dies, it triggers an immediate, formal diplomatic notification process.
The paperwork has to be filed.
Exactly. The U.S. Embassy has to formally contact the highest levels of the Mexican federal government to initiate the repatriation of the bodies. The problem,
Let me guess.
when that call came in, the Mexican federal government had absolutely no idea the operation had even taken place.
Ah. So they didn't get a nice briefing memo beforehand. They got a crisis dropped on their desk.
Literally overnight.
Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, finds out about a massive paramilitary raid involving foreign agents on her soil, only because she is suddenly asked to help clean up the wreckage.
Precisely. And this sparks a massive constitutional crisis. Under the Mexican Constitution, state governments like the state of Chihuahua do not possess the authority to run their own foreign policy.
Right. States can't just make treaties.
Exactly. They cannot legally authorize joint tactical operations with a foreign government. That requires explicit prior authorization from the federal level in Mexico City.
And Sheinbaum drew a very public, very hard line on this, didn't she?
She did. She insisted that while the United States and Mexico share intelligence, there were absolutely no joint operations on land or in the air. Zero boots on the ground.
Which is a stance deeply rooted in history for them.
Oh, absolutely. The presence of U.S. armed agents operating on Mexican soil touches the rawest historical nerves regarding national sovereignty.
Because sovereignty is ultimately about who actually controls the land and who holds the monopoly on force, right?
Yes. And the timing here just amplifies the tension so much. This incident occurs right in the shadow of U.S. President Donald Trump making very public threats about using military action against the cartels inside Mexico.
Right, which puts everybody on edge.
Exactly. So when the U.S. Ambassador, Ronald Johnson, who, by the way, the sources note, is a former Green Beret and CIA agent.
Which is a very interesting detail.
Very. When he praises the mission, the Mexican federal government views it as a severe breach of protocol and a direct challenge to their authority.
Let me try to put this in perspective for you listening. Think about how the chain of command is supposed to work. Imagine if a local Texas county sheriff decided to run a joint armed raid with British intelligence deep in the Texas desert.
That would be insane.
Right. And they simply didn't bother to inform Washington, D.C. until a British agent died. The federal government was completely bypassed, so no wonder Mexico's president is upset.
That paints the picture perfectly. It severely undermines federal authority. But, it forces us to ask the next logical question.
Which is why.
Right. If the consequences of getting caught are this severe, why did the state of Chihuahua do it? Why would local police risk a constitutional crisis to work off the books with the U.S. Embassy?
My assumption is desperation. I mean, the cartel isn't exactly waiting around for diplomatic paperwork to clear. But what does the source material say is the actual mechanism driving this shadow alliance?
Well, if we look at the policy papers from the Strauss Center, we find the answer in the math. The strategy is shifted, and the budgets have been completely gutted.
Gutted how?
The data shows that the United States has drastically reduced its foreign assistance to Mexico for security. We are looking at proposed budgets slashing funding from $137 million down to just $87 million.
Wow, that is a 36% cut. $50 million just disappearing.
Poof, gone.
But explain how that money actually functions on the ground. When we say security assistance, what exactly is being defunded here?
It funds the real backbone of international counter-narcotics efforts. We're talking about encrypted communication networks, intelligence sharing software, tactical gear, and training infrastructure.
The nuts and bolts.
Exactly. The Strauss Center notes that these financial reductions affect almost every single budget line related to cross-border security. But the money is really only half the story.
What's the other half?
The U.S. strategy fundamentally changed its objective. Security is now framed primarily as an immigration enforcement issue.
Meaning the priority is stopping the movement of people, not dismantling the cartels.
Correct. The stated goal from Washington shifted toward shutting down illicit pathways to stop unauthorized migration. Fighting cartels to stabilize the region became a secondary priority, and the funding reflects that pivot.
And I want to make something really clear here. Looking at the Strauss Center data, this isn't about right or left politics. We're not taking sides here. It is literally about a math problem.
Right, it's just the numbers.
When Washington pulls $50 million out of the region to focus on immigration, local state cops are left with a massive security vacuum, regardless of who is sitting in the Oval Office.
Because the cartels aren't cutting their budgets.
Exactly. The cartels are still running massive factories with literal worker camps. So the local AEI director looks at his resources, sees his federal and international support drying up, and realizes he is totally outgunned.
And that creates the really dangerous corner these local authorities are backed into.
Mm-hmm.
If the official bilateral security framework is stagnating, they have to rely on informal shadow partnerships.
Right.
If the U.S. Embassy quietly offers highly trained personnel, former military guys, and resources under the guise of instruction, local police are going to take the help because they are fighting a war.
If you cut a fire department's budget but demand they put out twice as many fires, they're going to accept help from anyone who shows up with a hose, even if it breaks protocol.
That's exactly it. But the fallout from these budget cuts isn't just about strategy or state-level desperation.
There's more?
Yeah. The sources reveal that these financial decisions have deeply personal, devastating bureaucratic consequences for the very Americans who died in that ravine.
Okay, this brings us to a highly controversial detail highlighted by the Straits Times, right?
Yes, because when you have two American officials dead at the bottom of a ravine in a foreign country, the immediate assumption is that the U.S. government activates a highly specialized machine to bring them home.
You'd expect a dedicated team of experts who know exactly how to navigate that specific crisis.
You do. But that team no longer exists.
Wait, really?
Really. The U.S. State Department recently fired the entire Office of Casualty Assistance, or the OCA. They were terminated alongside 350 other employees in a sweeping effort to shrink the size of the federal government.
Explain the mechanism of what the OCA actually did. Because bringing a body home from a cartel zone isn't exactly like calling a shipping company. What specific capability was lost when those 350 employees were cut?
Think about the staggering logistics of repatriation. First, you're dealing with a hostile environment. You need local death certificates from a foreign municipality, which requires navigating complex international law.
Right.
You need to secure transport from a rural morgue to an airport tarmac, often coordinating with foreign militaries just for protection. You have to arrange diplomatic clearances for the flight.
It's a logistical nightmare.
And simultaneously, you are acting as the primary liaison for a deeply grieving family back in the States. The OCA was created specifically for this after the 1998 al-Qaeda embassy bombings. They were the absolute specialists.
I'm going to use an analogy here to show how crazy this is for you listening. Firing the OCA to save money is like firing all the air traffic controllers to save a few bucks, and then asking the airline's payroll department to land a 747 in a thunderstorm.
That's a perfect comparison.
The task doesn't go away. It just falls to people who have no earthly idea how to execute it.
And that is exactly what is happening right now. The complex task of bringing these newly deceased instructors home from Chihuahua has fallen to a General Employee Relations Office.
Employee relations, like HR.
Yes, HR. That office handles standard human resources, issues benefits, workplace disputes. They do not possess the specialized knowledge required for an international casualty evacuation.
And the irony in the sources is incredibly dark here. The team leader of the OCA, a man named Kirk Leach, received his termination notice right in the middle of actively repatriating another American official.
Yeah, a man named Brian Matthew Fawnin, who was killed in a different Mexican car crash just months prior.
They fired the expert while he was literally doing the job.
It reveals a massive disconnect. The system is pulling back its safety nets, stripping away vital support structures. At the exact moment, its people on the ground are taking on unprecedented risks.
Because they are still out there running these shadow ops.
Right. And to truly understand the level of risk those two unnamed embassy workers were exposed to, we have to examine the official warnings about the ground they were operating on.
Yes, this is the part that exposes the ultimate contradiction. Because the U.S. government knows exactly how lethal the state of Chihuahua is, they publish the data themselves.
It's public record.
If you pull up the U.S. State Department's own travel advisory for Mexico, Chihuahua is slapped with a Level 3 reconsider travel designation.
And a Level 3 designation isn't just a polite suggestion to, be careful. The advisory explicitly cites the high risk of terrorism, crime, and kidnapping.
It spills it out.
It does. It details how violent crime and cartel gang activity are widespread across the state. It goes out of its way to note that U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents have been victims of kidnapping in that specific region.
But what really fascinates me is how the advisory treats official U.S. government employees. It doesn't just say stay alert. It lays out a rigid, highly restrictive set of rules. Walk us through those mandates.
Well, for official personnel, the rules are absolute. They are strictly forbidden from traveling after dark.
Okay, no night driving.
Right. They are forbidden from driving between border cities using interior Mexican highways. They are mandated to stay within explicitly mapped safe zones. In certain high-risk areas around Chihuahua, they cannot even travel in standard cars. They are required to use heavily armored vehicles.
So the mechanism of the policy is containment. The State Department is telling its own people, the environment is so incredibly dangerous, you cannot step outside these designated lines, and you absolutely cannot move when the sun goes down.
That is the official doctrine, without question.
Yet, we have 2 U.S. Embassy instructors deep in the cartel-controlled mountains leading an armed convoy at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Breaking basically every rule.
It completely shatters the official doctrine. It is like hanging a giant illuminated no swimming sign at a pool, but using that exact pool to secretly train Olympic divers in the dark. The rules clearly do not apply to the people fighting the shadow war.
The contradiction is the beating heart of this entire crisis. You have the official policy, which preaches safety, containment, and strict bilateral agreements.
What we say on paper.
Exactly. Then you have the operational reality, which demands getting in the lead car, hitting the mega labs, and neutralizing the threat. When those two worlds violently collide, as they did in that ravine, the entire illusion shatters.
The system breaks down.
Totally breaks down. You get constitutional outrage from the Mexican federal government because they were kept in the dark, and you get bureaucratic chaos from a defunded State Department trying to figure out how to bring its people home using an HR department.
So think about the web we just untangled for you. What started as a simple, tragic news alert on your phone about a car crash off a mountain road is actually a massive exposure of international policy.
It connects so many different threads.
It really does. It involves the mechanics of Mexican constitutional law and the fragile balance of state versus federal power. It involves heavily defunded security budgets, where $50 million vanishes, leaving local cops desperate enough to run shadow ops.
It involves the tragic firing of the very specialists meant to bring fallen heroes home.
Right. And it exposes the dangerous hypocrisy of international drug enforcement in restricted Level 3 zones.
It forces us to look past the carefully managed press conferences. Politicians will debate border walls, they'll argue over trade agreements, and they will draw hard lines regarding national sovereignty on camera.
Because that's what the public expects.
Right, they construct these narratives for the public. But the actual physical work, the dismantling of industrial chemical labs and the disruption of cartel supply lines, that relies entirely on unnamed shadow workers.
People whose things we don't even know.
Exactly. These are people operating in the dark corners of foreign mountains, quietly bypassing those very same hard lines just to get the job done.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over. We started with the violent image of that lead vehicle plunging into the muddy waters of a Mexican ravine.
The moment it all went wrong.
The exact moment where official, sanitized policy collided with hidden, lethal reality. So ask yourself, what happens to the stability of global security when the people doing the most dangerous, essential jobs become politically inconvenient for the very governments that sent them into the dark?